Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we are going to discuss about implementing authentication and authorization and also encoding the password with decrypt password encoder. Here, I am having the application so-called authentication and authorization application to implement the authentication and authorization, the basic Spring security to the application. Spring Boot application. Here I'm having the application, this authentication and authorization application that employee registered with his details. Here I'm having the page so-called employee page that employee will register by entering his details that redirect to login page. For example, here I'm entering the I'm entering some name like Matthew W email address is @gmail.com and the password also I'm entering MATTHEW. Phone number like some randomly I'm giving the phone number and the address should be something like Pune. That redirects to when I have given the employee details, it will redirect to the login page and these details will be saved into the database. For example, I'm clicking the save button. Here is the login page. After entering the valid credentials in the login page, password should match with the password that we have entered in the registration of the employee. For example, here I'm entering the in the login page I'm entering the user matthew@gmail.com and this password what I am entering in the login page should match with the password that I have given in the registration page. Then only it will redirect to the employee details. Login. This will redirect to the employee complete details. When the login page password and the registration password, both passwords are matched, that will redirect to the employee details page. This is the basic application that I have built. For this application, I am implementing the Spring security for this application. For that, here this is the basic application details, complete details. This is the employee controller class that I have built. This is the employee controller class code. And let me open the form.xml. Let me uncomment the dependency, Spring Starter security dependency. Control-C. Then it will add the dependency to the class part. First thing we will do to implement this Spring security is we will encode the password by using bcrypt password encoder. Yes, it is downloading the Spring security corresponding dependencies. completed. Let me open the employee controller class. In this employee controller class, let me inject the decrypt password encoder. Private decrypt password encoder and auto wire this the rate of auto wire and encode the password in the registration page, which is there in the when we are saving the employee details in the registration page. Let me encode the password that we are entering in the registration employee details registration page. Before saving the employee details, I am encoding it. For example, employee, by taking the incoming employee dot set password set password encoder dot encode employee dot get password. It will automatically encode the password. Control C. After this, let me create a bean in the configuration class. Let me create a configuration class and create a bean of bcrypt password encoder in the configuration class. Class keep that in the config package. Then config, click on finish. Annotate this class with @configuration and also enable web security, so that it will activate the web security related, and and this configured class is meant to be a security related class. In this web config class, let me create a bean public bcrypt password encoder by creating a method return new, create an instance of bcrypt password encoder and return the encoder. Return bcrypt password encoder. Bcrypt password encoder and annotate this class with the rate of date, so that in the runtime by the IOC controller, by the IOC version of control, it will create a bean and inject it at the runtime, so that we won't get any errors like class not found, errors like that. There won't be any problems further. After this bcrypt password encoder, we will create a user details service interface. Create a user details service interface. First of all, let me in the controller in the entity class, new class, take the role entity, click on finish. After that, implements granted authority. What is this granted authority mean? Granted authority represents an authority granted to an authentication object. It is represented initially as a string. That means we have some roles and responsibilities to access, to write, to read, to implement all those roles. Initially, we need some granted authority to represent an authentication object. That means to access it or to make any changes while accessing some resources, to make any further changes for that resources. We need some authorities. That authorities to implement those authorities, we need some granted authority permission. So for that we are implementing this granted authority. Annotate this class with at the rate of entity and also at the rate of data private integer id private string name add an implemented methods return the name. Control delete the tools. That means here this granted authority interface has one method called getAuthority. This getAuthority method will return a string type. That means it is returning the name, because it is a string type. That means, for example, the granted authority means I said no before, which role we have to access from. For example, admin role or user role. For that admin role, we have to gain access for the write permissions or read permissions. For that, we need this granted authority. At the rate of ID, at the rate of generated value, str strategy generated type dot identity. Identity. Let me build a relationship between the employee class and the role class. For example, here private set employee employees. Okay, I'm taking EMP. And annotate this with at the rate of many to many, many to many, which is mapped by control. Control should go to organize the inputs. The set will implement from the java.util.set. Okay, control should organize the inputs per system type. Yes, everything is set. Let me open the employee entity. In that employee entity, private set role, build the many to many relationship roles. Control shift to organize the imports. And let me annotate this with many to many, many to many, and also join table. Join table name should be, I'm taking the name as emp hyphen role, comma, join columns. Initially it is giving the array of columns at the rate of join column name should be emp hyphen id, emp hyphen id, and the inverse join column should be the rate of join column name should be emp role underscore id. Role underscore id. Yes, we have mapped the class with at the rate of many to many on both the sides. In the role based, annotate here with at the rate of many to many and mapped by rows. Control shift format to control save. Control save. After that, create the role repository in the repositories. New class interface role repository. Click on finish. This role repository extends JPA repository, which takes the role as the class and the primary key as integer. Control Shift O to organize the inputs. Format, Control Shift format and Control Shift. Let me create a user details service implementation. New class create the thing service package user details service IMPI implementation, which implements user details service interface, which comes from the security.core.user details package. First thing we have to do is annotate this class with @service, which extends from the stereotype annotations package. After this, first thing we have to discuss is this user details service implementation class, which implements from the user details service interface. In the user details service interface, we have the method so called load user by username. That means from the database, by using some primary key or by using some email with the reference, we are getting the complete details of the user. This user detail service is a core interface. This user detail service is a core interface in Spring Security, which is used to retrieve the user's authentication and authorization info. This user details service is used to retrieve the user's authentication and authorization info. Control delete the to-dos. Control Shift Enter. Here, inject the repository, employee repository, private employee. Repository repos and auto it. After this, repos dot find by email. By using the email, we are getting the complete user details. Press Control +1. Assign statement to the local variable, which returns the EMP. Here write the condition, so called if EMP double equal to null, throw new user name username not found exception, and write the message like user not found for the email username, and return the user details, complete user details. Return new user details, new user emp dot get email comma emp dot get password comma emp dot get authority, get roles, control shift format and control save. After this, here in this user detail service implementation, what we are doing is we are injecting the employee repository. We are injecting the employee repository here, and we are returning the user details. First of all, after injecting the employee repository, we are loading the complete user details information by using the find by email custom finder method. Find by email. Here in the repository, in the employee repository, we have mentioned the custom finder method, which returns the single employee by using the email find by email method. Initially, when we return this as a type of a method, it will convert this method into the query and fetch the employee details by using the email, based on the email. After the user details, we are returning the complete user details. After this, create a service class, new class, create a service security service, finish. Take the server interface, annotate this with unknown. Take an abstract method, boolean, login, string, username comma string password. Control shift format and control save, and create an implementation class for this. New class, security service NPI, which implements the security service. Annotate this class with @service. This will override the method abstract method because we have implemented the security service interface. Delete the tools. In the security service implementation, first of all, inject the user detail service interface. Private user details service user details service and auto validate auto validate. After this, from the user detail service implementation, by using this interface, we are getting the load user by username method by calling this user detail service. By using this reference variable, we are calling the method which is there in the user details service implementation, which returns the complete user details. After getting the complete user details, we will authenticate it. To authenticate the complete user details, we need username password authentication token, and we will create an instance of it. First of all, what is username password authentication token? We will provide the user details, passwords and roles so that this will authenticate whatever the password there in DB against the password that we are passing. That means that we are giving, initially we are giving username password authentication. Token equal to new username password authentication token. This will take the user details, password, this will take the objective principal. That means it will take the user details and the incoming password and also the authorities. User details dot get authorities. That means the roles. After getting all these details, again I'm saying username password authentication token. What this will do? It will provide the complete user details, passwords and roles, so that this will authenticate whatever the password there in database against the password we sent with the request. This username password authentication token responsibility. After this, we will authenticate it. To authenticate it, we need authentication manager. Private authentication manager, authentication manager and auto verify. Take this reference variable, copy it here, dot authenticate method, authenticate, pass the token, it will authenticate it. After this, if the token is authenticated, token dot is authenticated. If this token is authenticated, it will return a boolean value. Control 1, assign statement in local variable. Take this as the result. If this is authenticated, if this token is authenticated, result save this result in the, if the result becomes true, save this. If that means if the token is authenticated, that means if the details are true, if the details from the database came, then save these details in the object, authentication object by using the security context holder. Security context folder dot get context dot set authentication as the token. Means it initially this set authentication, it will create an initially user complete user details object. That means the user who is logging into the logging in by providing the user details, that user details object will be authentication object will be created and it will be saved. If we want the user details of that authenticated object, then we need security context holder dot get context. Then we will get that authentication, complete authentication details. Here, if you want to discuss in detail about authentication manager, if the principal of the input authentication is valid and verified, authentication manager returns an authentication instance with the authentication flag that sets to true. That means if the details from the database are valid, are correct, or came from the database, are true or real, then it will set the authentication flag as true. Otherwise, if the principal, that means if the details are not valid, user details are not valid, it throws authentication exception. If we also want to discuss about security context folder, it is a helper class. The security context folder is an helper class which provide access to the security context. By default, it uses a thread local object to store security context. To store the user details, by default, it uses a thread local object. And also, the key thing is, if you want to discuss, the most important key thing is, how do you get the current context from the security context folder? That means how we can get the current user details from the security context folder. How we can retrieve the current logged in user details. In order to get the current logged in user details, username details, we first need a security context which is obtained from the security context folder. Here it is, security context. By using this is a helper class. Security context folder is an helper class. From that we are getting the security context which obtained from the security context folder. The security context helps keep the user details in authentication object. This get context, this security context will help to keep the user details in the authentication object, and it will create the authentication object. Whenever we want the current logged in security details, we can get those details by using the get authentication like that and return the result. Return the result. Control format and control save. After this, let me provide the authorization by going into the web-config class, extend web security configure adapter. Web security config adapter. This is like a plugin. Web security configure adapter is like a plugin so that we can override some classes like this. HTTP class. For example, configure method. Which takes HTTP security as a parameter, override that class which comes from the web security configure adapter From that, by using the http dot authorize request authorize authorize request authorize request, provide the and matches slash, which is there in the employee controller class. Provide the patterns, show a copy, save employee, copy. Save employee, show copy, show employee details, save employment details, login, copy, slash Slow, slow. Comma. Slowly. Copy. Get out employees. Dot. Permit all these patterns. Dot. And matches. Take another pattern which will be accessed by the only admin itself. Employee controller. Copy. Slash admin. Dot has any authority admin dot any request from the admin dot authenticate dot cs authenticated dot and dot csrf dot disable the cross-site reference. Yes. After this, and create a bean of authentication manager, override the method so that in future we won't get any errors. Annotate this with the rate of bean and name this as name. For example, this is optional. Bean IDs. Bean IDs dot authentication manager. Control shift format and control shift. Here we have done with everything. We have configured everything from end to end. Let me check with the output. Control save. Terminate the process and restart the application again. known as Spring Boot. Yes, application started working. Let me test the application. Okay. Next. Okay. Let me enter the employee details. Anish. gmail.com. Password ITSH. Phone number. Address. This save. Enter the details. Invalid username and password. Okay. We have not used the employee controller. Call the here in the remove this and inject the security service class. Inject the security service class. Private security service. Security service. Control Shift to organize the imports. Director auto by Control Shift format. Control save. After by using the reference variable, in the login method here in the if statement, service dot login, call the method security service abstract method, pass the email password. This will return the response. By using this response, redirect to the application. Control C. We are getting some data. Where it is. Yes, application is working. Application has started working. Finally, enter the employee details like Venkatesh, gmail.com, password This password and the login password must be same, otherwise it will throw the exception. See here, in the registration page, I have entered the password as Venkatesh. You will see what will happen if I enter the wrong password here. See here, it is showing the 403 forbidden, bad credentials. It is showing the exception like that. Let me check with the admin slash admin. Copy. Let me run the application again. gmail.com as well as numbers and others. Save. Username Ram. This will be the employee details. Okay, and everything is slash API slash admin slash show line. Yes. And finally, this is all about Spring Security, implementing Spring Security Authentication and Authorization. Everything is working, everything is under control, even though we got few exceptions in the middle and few disturbances, and finally it is working. The admin role is working and the user role is working, everything is working, everything we can access. That's all about the Spring Security Authentication and Authorization.